Imagine you're headed into the dentist's office. Your old dentist is retired and this is your first time seeing this new one. You never cared much for the dentists, but at least they're playing Cartoon Network in the waiting room. Your name is called. The nurse leads you to the chair and tells you to wait for him, leaving the room. A few minutes later, a tall man opens the door, eyes locked on you. His hair is stringy and he smells funny. He greets you with a cold, deep, and steady voice. Something about him makes you uncomfortable. He's smiling, but something's not right. He hasn't broken eye contact a single time since he's entered. You never did like yellow eyes. In that deep, unnerving voice, he tells you that he'll be putting you to sleep now. You realize with horror that his mouth wasn't moving. The gas mask is pulled over your face. The subject of creepy characters is a rather interesting topic in pop culture. Cartoon Network has been home to some of the most memorable and nostalgic shows on television. One of the things that made these shows so memorable was their tendency to feature at least one character that could be seen as a creepy villain of sorts. When we think of creepy, these characters tend to have a few traits in common. The way they speak is strange and unnatural. The way they behave with a perpetual stare or an unending smile is unnerving. In today's Darkology, we'll be exploring 5 characters from 5 different and beloved Cartoon Network originals, some glaringly obvious, others more obscure, and just what makes them so creepy. Kicking off this list is a character from the Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack. The very cartoon itself had many creepy undertones. It was notorious for being a wacky hybrid of SpongeBob SquarePants, Courage the Cowardly Dog, and Ren and Stimpy. Frequent use of hyper-realistic close-ups blended with an overall macabre tone that could well be described as unsettling. How this scene got approved as kid-friendly is beyond me.
Hey there, cutie. Aren't you beautiful? I think I know what you want. String! Oh.
The show was packed full of some of the creepiest characters to ever grace the network.
I see you're not yellow, fellow, but I don't want to make you blue. So get a clue and purple the plug before you played, or I'll arrange.
You need to grow up.
Grow up? I'm 38 years old.
Take Peppermint Larry, for example. His obsession with his candy wife raised some serious questions. Was this inanimate object made of candy really moving and telling him to do things when we weren't looking? Or was Peppermint Larry suffering from some serious delusions? We'll return to this idea with a similar character from another cartoon later, but for me, when it comes to Flapjack, no character captured creepy quite as best as Dr. Barber.
Ah, customers. What can I do for you?
As his name suggests, his occupation was that of a barber and a doctor, with an obsessive proclivity for surgery. He could also be considered a mad scientist of sorts. His unusual tendency to say,
Yes?
and between sentences was rather discomforting. He also collected fish heads in the hair of his customers, feeding them through a hole in the floor to the creatures living in his basement. And then there was surgery.
Do you have any stories?
Surgery?
No, just stories.
Ah, so there's these 2 guys, and they think they want a story. But what they really want is surgery. They drink some of Dr. Barber's tea and fall asleep, and when they wake up, surgery. Would you like some tea?
So it's pretty obvious why we would find his obsession with subduing patrons for
surgery
creepy. But what else is there? Dr. Barber shares a certain facial feature that is common with the characters in Flapjack: a wide, gummy smile. Why are too many gums and teeth creepy? According to Laura Mirko, spokesperson for the Academy of General Dentistry, a smile serves as an individual's most powerful tool. A great smile can make a great lasting impression, boost a person's self-esteem and confidence, as well as improve their overall health. A gummy smile can be caused by a range of different factors, including small teeth, excess gum tissue, and a small upper lip. all of which are genetic. Studies that assess smiles have surveyed dentists, plastic surgeons, dermatologists, and the general public. In general, people find that a smile with 2 millimeters of exposed gum is largely deemed as a normal smile, whereas 4 millimeters is noticeable, with anything more than that being considered too much. The presence of too many gums in a smile may indicate to some that a person is smiling too much, which is usually an unsettling sign to most. There are some who have even gone so far as to have surgery on their smile to reduce this effect. A surgical procedure known as a gingivectomy works to remove extra gum tissue. Recently, some have taken a step away from surgery, opting for a lighter, more temporary procedure in the form of Botox. Injections of Botox into the upper lip effectively paralyze it and keep it from rising when the patient smiles, leaving the gums covered. However, some people might go overboard with Botox and end up with a crooked smile. How about teeth? A study from the University of Minnesota found that smiles that were too wide, too highly angled, and that showed a lot of teeth were not the best at creating a positive impression, falling more on the scale of creepy and fake. Also, we're generally able to discern between a genuine smile and a fake one, just by looking at the eyes. Hyperdontia is the condition of having additional teeth to the regular amount, but perhaps simply exposing too many teeth alone creates this unsettling effect. Perhaps the true psychology behind what makes a smile creepy stems from the context and situation it's presented in. Take, for example, a surgeon smiling after the death of a patient, or a politician smiling in response to being called a liar. Francis McAndrew and Sarah Kenke, authors of On the Nature of Creepiness, an empirical study in New Ideas in Psychology from 2016, say that creepiness is what we feel when we think someone might be a threat, but we're not sure. The ambiguity leaves us frozen in place, wallowing in unease. Remind you of anyone? Dr. Barber is often shown smiling, even when there isn't an apparent reason to be doing so. This is one of the biggest reasons why he's seen as so creepy. Especially since we assume that he's secretly thinking about performing non-consensual surgery or collecting hair and feeding it to the strange creatures living in the basement. Dr. Barber's monotonous speech pattern is also a rather unsettling trait, one that he shares with the next feature on our list.
Typically, when someone is speaking calmly and clearly and doesn't change their tone too often, we find it very reassuring. However, this isn't exactly the case if the speaker is talking too monotonously.
I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me, and I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen.
But what is it about talking monotonously that's so creepy? Perfectly monotone speakers who lack any variation and don't stress any words or syllables sound unnatural. It could indicate that the speaker is either crazy, being mind-controlled, is an imposter, or is being threatened against their will. The cartoon Kids Next Door had a villain that talked just like this, the delightful children from down the lane. Even that name sounds creepy.
Well, if it isn't the Kids Next Door, have you arrived to abscond with my birthday cake like you do every year?
Like Dr. Barber, the delightful children from down the lane spoke in a very monotonous tone, as if they were dead inside or masking some sort of insidious agenda. And what's worse, they all spoke as one being, like a hive mind. They were the antithesis of the kids next door, succumbing to the pressures of their perceived society and striving to grow up as fast as possible to become boring adults. Indeed, it wasn't just the monotonous way they spoke, but the idea that they were being controlled by something far more sinister. And what most people find haunting about a hive mind is this idea of losing your individuality, losing your freedom for control. This and independence are highly valued concepts in our culture, especially in Western culture. We want to live our own lives, we want to be in control of ourselves. But there's something so sad and concerning about seeing a person you know change into a shell of their former selves in pursuit of becoming part of the hive. And in the case of the delightful children from down the lane, this unified mentality was the result of, spoiler alert, de-lifealization or brainwashing. You see, in the film Operation Zero, it's revealed that they were former members of the missing Sector Z. They were so irreversibly mentally damaged that even being cured of their brainwashing only had a temporary effect. But perhaps it isn't so much the mind-controlling influence of their evil boss, known in the show as Father, that torments the delightful children from down the lane. Perhaps it's a much more deeper condition of mental illness, connected to this messed up version of reality, as with our next case.
Ed, Edd and Eddy was one of Cartoon Network's original cartoon lineups that featured a slice-of-life format. It followed a group of kids living in a cul-de-sac and their wild adventures in pursuit of typical childlike desires like candy and quarters. And for the most part, this show didn't have too much in the realm of creepy. However, there was one character who I thought had a strange attachment to a certain piece of wood, a certain 2x4 with a happy face drawn on its surface. That's right, I'm talking about Plank.
Plank? He's a freaking piece of wood for crying out loud! Ugh, this is stupid. What do you think, Diljo?
I know, it sounds ridiculous. Plank doesn't exactly scream creepy on the surface, but hear me out. Johnny often talked about Plank like he was a real person. He would get upset whenever Plank wasn't acknowledged by the rest of the cul-de-sac kids, and they would usually roll with it, leaving skeptics like Eddie in bewilderment.
Johnny's cracked!
He'd even claimed that Plank told him things and often talked to the 2x4 as if it were a loved one.
That's lunch. What do you mean you special ordered?
Plank is implied by Johnny to be a bit of a prankster and a wise guy. Johnny's so immersed in the world of his best friend that he even created parents and a friend for Plank out of other pieces of wood that were lying around.
Look at what you did to Plank's mommy and daddy!
Who knows what this will do to Johnny when he sees this, Eddie? His ties to reality are already tenuous at best.
What's rather chilling about this are the questions it poses. Was Johnny suffering from serious delusions? Or was Plank really speaking to him? I think it was both. But to better understand where this goes, we'll first need to take a look at hypnotherapy. The mind is like an iceberg. Most of it's below the surface. We each have many experiences after we're born, and over time, a lot of them become buried out of sight. Memories that we ourselves can't remember because they're buried so far deep down in our unconscious mind. Hypnosis is looked at by some as a method for unlocking the subconscious mind, and in some cases, the unconscious mind. This will be relevant in a second, I promise. So back to Plank. Like dolls and mannequins, inanimate objects with faces have a tendency to make us think, am I being watched? Danny Antonucci, creator of Ed, Edd and Eddy, has confirmed that Plank is nothing more than an inanimate block of wood. Though in the episode All Eds Are Off, Plank is seen moving throughout the school campus without Johnny's assistance. In the same episode, Johnny is shown to have a hard time making decisions without Plank nearby, and couldn't even last a day separated from him.
Without Plank, Melonhead's falling apart, begging to get bossed around.
Think, Johnny, think! Just make up your mind.
What's that, Plank? You want to boss me around instead?
Nobody takes orders from this chunk of termite food except me!
This indicates that Plank may have some direct influence over Johnny. One rather peculiar and telling instance from the show was an episode where Eddie acquired a hypnotizing wheel from one of Double D's psychology books and went around the neighborhood hypnotizing the kids of the cul-de-sac. Almost everyone fell victim to Eddie's scam, but when they got to Johnny, he wasn't affected. More interestingly, Johnny ran away in horror, exclaiming that they'd turned Plank into a mindless zombie. Why would Johnny perceive that Plank was hypnotized when Johnny himself wasn't? Well, what if Johnny and Plank are both parts of the same person? What if they're two very distinguished personalities living in the same body? Could it possibly be that Johnny suffers from a form of dissociative identity disorder, a condition formerly known as multiple personality disorder? Perhaps the Plank personality was the one watching the hypnosis ring during their encounter with Eddie. While we've all seen the theatrical stage version of hypnosis performed on an audience member, hypnotherapy in real life is more like a state of heightened suggestibility. The most frequent clinical uses of hypnotherapy include breaking bad habits, overcoming insomnia, recalling forgotten experiences, and as an anesthetic for managing pain. Some even believe that hypnosis can be used to help those who suffer from dissociative identity disorder, or DID, though this has become a controversial subject. Some have argued that hypnosis might actually trigger situations similar to clinical DID in a healthy individual rather than cure DID in those who have it. What I found creepy in this revelation was the mystery surrounding this unseen Plank personality. Just who is Plank? We've seen similar mysteries throughout other places in pop culture. Minor spoilers ahead: Teddy Daniels from Shutter Island, Malcolm Rivers from Identity, Mort Rainey from Secret Window, Gollum from Lord of the Rings, Tyler Durden from Fight Club, Norman Bates from Psycho, and more recently, Kevin from Split. These other personalities are often portrayed as rather mischievous and looking to cause trouble. In real life, DID has been used as a controversial reasoning for a handful of criminals in court. These include the likes of Billy Milligan, who, under another personality, kidnapped, robbed, and raped 3 women in 1977, and Juanita Maxwell, who also, under another personality, murdered a 72-year-old woman in 1979, and later robbed 2 banks in 1988. Psychiatrists believe that DID might be a sign and the result of childhood abuse. A splintering in personality might be a way of coping with a severe trauma and a way to protect the main personality. And what's most concerning about Plank is that, since he isn't ever seen taking full control of Johnny's body, we don't really get to hear what mischief he might be whispering to the Johnny personality. Plank, and other real-life situations like him, continue to remain an enigma.
From subtly creepy with Plank to now profoundly creepy with our next character, we continue with our list, this time delving into the world of the Powerpuff Girls. Some of us may remember this distinct feeling of dread that washed over us as children, watching the debut of this villain, as the announcer himself cowered in fear at the very sight of him.
Oh no, not... I can't say it! This is a villain so evil, so sinister, so horribly vile, that even the utterance of his name strikes fear into the hearts of men! The only safe way to refer to this King of Darkness is simply... him.
According to creator Craig McCracken's scale of the Powerpuff Girls villains, him is at the very top, simply because he's the most evil. And that's pretty obvious from his appearance alone. The guy looks like the devil himself, and while this isn't actually the first time we've seen a devil-like character on Cartoon Network, he was memorable for being especially creepy and sinister. With him, it wasn't really his evil deeds that made him creepy. I mean, the Powerpuff Girls had tons of villains like Mojo Jojo and Fuzzy Lumpkins that were up to no good, but they weren't really creepy.
You see, I've taken all of their love for you and turned it into hate.
What made him particularly unnerving was the way he talked and moved. He spoke in a very polite, falsetto voice that echoed, and depending on what he'd be saying, would abruptly switch back and forth between that and this enraged masculine voice. Another thing was his seemingly perpetual smile. Even in the face of defeat or being wailed on, he often eerily smiled back, maintaining that freaky falsetto pitch. And what really brought it home was, despite this overly false positive demeanor, what he was saying was often dark and violent. It was the complete opposite of this cheery facial expression of his, twisting the whole message being conveyed to the viewers. And as we've learned before, an out-of-place smile raised a couple of eyebrows. Just like an evil clown masking its true agenda behind a misplaced smile, him was unpredictable, and it's that uncertainty that made him really creepy. You never really knew when he was going to pop, and so his presence on and off screen just felt dreadful. His method of attack was often psychological, preying on weaknesses like fear and trying to get the Powerpuff Girls to fight amongst themselves. And what's more, unlike the other villains who wanted something in return for their evil deeds like fame, fortune, or power, him didn't want any of that. He didn't have an apparent reason for doing bad things, he just seemed to enjoy the chaos.
I'll be back!
But it doesn't even stop there. One of the main characteristics for him is a trait that he shares with our final feature.
There was no way I was going to talk about creepy characters in Cartoon Network and not talk about this show.
We interrupt this program to bring you Courage, the Cowardly Dog Show, starring Courage, the Cowardly Dog!
Creepy happenings are integral to the premise of Courage the Cowardly Dog. The intro literally phrases the words, "creepy stuff happens in nowhere," and boy did they ever.
Who?
Our unlikely hero had to encounter some of the most nightmare-fueled villains, the likes of which many horror movie villains wish they compared to. And to be fair, there were too many great choices to choose from. So here are some honorable mentions. Kitty, King Ramses, The Blue Thing, 'Cats', The Violin Girl.
Footage, which I say did encourage me to be quite naughty. Courage.
That's right. Muriel's estranged nephew and perhaps a relative of Dr. Barber too, Freaky Fred. From a creepy and perpetual smile to that chillingly deep voice to those terrible yellow eyes and questionable sanity, Freaky Fred encapsulates the creepy elements of all the other characters in this list. What fascinated me most about this episode was how endearing Fred's character was despite his eerie narration throughout.
That's when my tired eyes beheld a doggy dog. Like dog he spelled. D-O-G is what he spelled, and that's how I spell naughty.
The way he rhymed every sentence made his story even more interesting. It was like listening to a serial killer talk about his past and how he began killing. There's even a subtle hint of remorse as he reflects on his most recent victim. That is until he turns towards his current one. Not long after his arrival, we learn that he's not just visiting, but has actually escaped from the mental hospital. Seeing Courage notice that tag on Fred's wrist gave me a surge of goosebumps. So what can we learn about Freaky Fred's appearance? What trait does he have in common with him? Well, a perpetual smile for one, but what can we gather about looking at his eyes? They say that the eyes are the windows to the soul after all. In Darkology number 14, we learned about the psychological properties of the colors blue and red. That is to say, how certain types of the electromagnetic radiation of light can affect our mood and behavior. Where red is physical and blue is intellectual, yellow is emotional. The yellow wavelength is relatively long and essentially stimulating, and since the stimulus is emotional, it's the strongest color psychologically. Yellow in a positive light can be seen as representative of optimism, confidence, self-esteem, extroversion, emotional strength, friendliness, and even creativity. But Fred's eyes aren't quite yellow. They're more of a sickly off-yellow green, and his whole color palette seems to be tinged with this color. The wrong tone of yellow, or too much of it, can symbolize irrationality, emotional fragility, and depression. Most of all, it can give rise to fear and anxiety. And what about green? The psychological property of this color is balance. Green is supposed to represent harmony, equilibrium, and peace. So perhaps an off-coloration of green might represent unbalance. If we look at fiction, a yellow sclera usually hints that a character might have a rather unscrupulous nature. That is to say, they aren't very honest and probably shouldn't be trusted. It gives us a sense of uncertainty itself being a prime contributor to why we find things creepy. But what else is it about yellow eyes? This thought may have been inspired historically by canines, felines, reptiles, and birds of prey, which often have very large irises in shades of amber, yellow, and orange. Irises so large they're sometimes mistaken for scleras. These species are known for being conniving, clever, and wise. And when we look at reptiles especially, they are often seen as villainous. Perhaps there's some biblical influence. In real life, a yellow or brown sclera in humans is unhealthy, and usually a symptom of allergies or jaundice, and could also be a sign of alcoholism. So what's my point here? How does Freaky Fred having yellow eyes have any different of an effect than, say, cats having yellow eyes? Well, the truth is, it doesn't. This uncertainty around characters with yellow eyes isn't unique to Freaky Fred. The effect is the same. He just creeped me out the most. It's a trait prevalent in many villains scattered throughout Cartoon Network, as well as in other facets of pop culture. And it isn't just unnatural eyes. Certain details can go a long way in changing how we perceive a character, from a smile, to a voice, to a splintered perception of reality. So now, viewers, I ask you, who's a cartoon character you found creepy, and why did you find them so? Let me know in the comments below. If you'd like more nostalgic cartoon content, be sure to check out 11 banned or forgotten cartoon characters over on Blameitonjorge's channel. I'll be presenting some of them over there. Oh, and special thanks to my friend Snuffbomb for agreeing to make a short cameo here. Both of their channels are in the description below. It would mean a lot to me if you'd go and show them some love. And as always, thanks for watching. Want to see more? click here to check out the official Darkology playlist.